Last week, I had a telephone call from my uncle, who is a retired psychology professor and is always looking for an opportunity to do some research and have an interesting conversation. I take him up on the conversation part every chance I get because I love the way his mind works and he asks me great questions that get me thinking. While he was doing some research about the productivity work that I've been doing, he came across the phrase time well spent. There were several different meanings that we had a chuckle about, but when you break it down, it really came down to this. The things we do and the choices we make, are they time well spent? How do those choices serve us? Do your choices bring you closer to being more or less productive? All right, this is the time where you grab your coffee, your tea, water bottle, or something a little stronger if it's later in the day for you, as I'm going to challenge you on defining what you want productivity to look like for you. But sometimes, to come up with that answer, we need to look at what our definition was in the past, what we have been holding on to, and what needs to change. As I contemplated a topic for my next podcast, the phrase time well spent sparked a memory and brought me back to the very beginning of my career. 31 years ago, after I finished my thesis, art therapy with pediatric renal patients, 9 months of research with the bravest kids I ever met in my life. Now those kids and their families, they truly understood that time really does matter, and what you do with that time does make a difference. That being productive for many of those kids and families was always about what they could get done between medical treatments. All of those kids I work with had no or low functioning kidneys and had to depend on machines to clean the toxins from their bodies. They often had from 12 to 48 hours between treatments, depending on what type of dialysis they received, leaving them and their families to find their own unique definition of how to be productive. Imagine that. Imagine the rhythm of your life, how to plan your time, your career, your business, and relationships, all having to be planned in 12 to 48-hour segments. This experience and that of my personal history invited me into the world of entrepreneurship and self-employment. My goal was to build a business around the life I wanted. Now this is where it gets interesting. So with no contracts, no money, and really nothing except hope, a dream, and a part-time job at Odin Books, an awesome bookstore which focuses on educational and mental health resources. I'll drop their info in the show notes so you can take a look. I jumped. I remember my very first art therapy contract. It was actually a recommendation from a colleague. It was a weekly contract for 1 hour. The family needed me to go on site to them, and that was perfect because I was building an on-location therapeutic practice. The problem was I had no car, and the family lived almost 3 hours away by bus each way from my apartment. So I started trying to plot things out and find a solution. I didn't have a car, but I had time and I had a sister with a car. What I ended up doing was asking for help, taking the time to ask for what I needed and putting together a plan that would allow me to get to the one appointment once a week. This was my routine. I negotiated with my sister to borrow her car weekly. She lived about 45 minutes away by bus from where I lived, so I had to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning, take 2 buses from my apartment to where she lived, then take the car and drive another 45 minutes out into a rural area to see this family. I would see the family, and then I would do it all in reverse, and by the time I made it back to my apartment, half the day was gone. For 1 hour of therapy, 1 hour of paid work. Now, some people may see that as a waste of time, but I'm going to challenge you on that, because I believe, even now, that was time well spent. The time on the bus, the time in the car, the time going back and forth. That 1 hour of therapeutic work wasn't just helpful to the family, it was also helping me build my career, establish business relationships, and prove to myself that I was willing to do the hard work to build this business. Because when you're starting out at any point in your life, whether you're 23 like I was then or 56 like I am now, you have to put in the extra time to build something the way you want it. When I look back at that time in my life, it was a lot of running around. I took a lot of buses before I had a vehicle. I carried all my art supplies with me, and there was plenty of waiting for buses, missing buses, standing in the rain. But there were moments. I think back on them now. It was about character building. I needed to take the time to build up who I wanted to be as a professional and as a person. What were my values, my ethics? What was at the heart of every decision I made? But you can't do that alone. Well, at least I couldn't. I have a great little story for you. Now, this was a time before cell phones. Hard to remember, but it did exist. And so did the payphone. They were almost everywhere, and at the cost of only 25 cents per call, you made sure you always had a quarter on you. Unless you had one of those magical phone cards, but you didn't want to use those just for a 25-cent call. And you know what I did with that time at the bus stop? And with that 25 cents? While I waited? I called my mom. In episode 5, I told you her story, but I didn't mention that she had been a registered nurse before the brain tumor and surgery, and a caregiver through and through. And although she was never able to go back into nursing, you can never take the nurse out of the nurse. Well, every time I phoned her, no matter where I was or what time it was, she answered. She'd say, "Where are you today and what are you doing?" And I'd tell her. And we'd talk and laugh and share. And as I look back now, I see how all those calls fit directly into my now definition of productivity and time well spent. Because taking those few minutes allowed us to grow a deeper mother-daughter bond. And it wasn't about spending hours together. It was purposeful minutes, intentional time. Now that she's passed, I value that time even more. The waiting for the buses created space for laughter, for connection, for something that mattered deeply. But you don't have to be waiting for a bus to use your time in this way, and you don't have to be self-employed. You can be a teacher, a doctor, a publisher, a chef. Integrating relationship building into your busy day actually can help you to be more productive. When we feel support, we can refocus and get more done. You can share the hard parts. I invite you to share the hard parts. Those first few years of building my business, I often woke up wondering, what was I going to do with all the time in front of me when I wasn't on the bus? After a few difficult conversations with my dad, he suggested that I set up a bulletin board in my closet with little recipe cards with the goals of establishing a routine that fed me with consistency and positivity. Nowadays, there are some great apps that can replicate this if you want to lean into technology. I've used Miro, which is like an electronic sticky note app, or you can just go to the dollar store and buy some sticky notes or recipe cards and painter's tape for the wall. I do recommend painter's tape. Do not use Scotch tape on your wall. It will peel the paint off. When it came to the action part, though, every day I was to do 4 things. 1 networking contact, 1 activity outside the house with movement, 1 learning piece, reading or research, and 1 creative thing, something I enjoyed. Oh man, I think I need to do this again. I forgot how well it worked. Time to pull out the sticky notes for the wall as I'm building this new part of the business. At the time, though, I grumbled a bit and wondered if I should just get a job. And then I thought about my ultimate plan, that I wanted to be my own boss. I saw the benefits of self-employment, and I knew that was the path for me. I look back now and don't regret my choices for 1 minute. In the beginning, though, there were so many minutes, hours unfilled, but the bulletin board helped me stay focused and also accountable for how I spent my days, and if someone asked me what I was doing, I had an answer. I was also on a mission, and I guess I still am. Being productive, learning how to use my time more intentionally, and continuing to build my business around my life. I know not everyone has cheerleaders along the way in their personal and business lives, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. When you're building, when you're trying something new, and when time feels like it's just slipping away, my goal is to have a podcast that will help you get on track and stay on track. And even when things are hard, don't you dare let that stop you. You have beautiful minutes, hours, and days and years in front of you. You have the opportunity to make things and build things the way you want. Does it always work out exactly the way you planned? No. Sometimes things go off the rails, and when that happens, we take a breath and use the time set aside for one thing to deal with another, because that's life. Invest your time into people, places, and moments that matter. And that truly is the definition of time well spent. Thank you so much for spending your time with me on this episode of Your Productivity Pulse. If today's conversation sparked a moment of action or reflection, I invite you to keep that momentum going. More practical strategies designed to enhance productivity, reduce stress, and weave balance back into your life can be found by joining my newsletter at banartexpression.com. Once there, just head over to your Productivity Pulse podcast page to sign up, or you can find the link in the show notes. Remember, intention plus accountability equals productivity. Until next time, keep listening to your pulse.